Sing a song of 8 pawns for king and queen they ward, 2 and 30 black squares upon the checkered board. When the game was over, the crowd began to sing, "We'll make a dish that's best served cold to set before the king." Chapter 23. Past tournaments in which Elsbeth had competed usually drew no more than a handful of spectators, mostly parents, teachers, and certain oddly fanatic chess enthusiasts. In addition, the stakes were no higher than personal pride, and on occasion, a trophy, a certificate, or a small cash prize. Now, as a crowd of 200 gathered around that mossy log, most of them secretly rooting against her, and some not so secretly, she could hear her heart accelerating, could feel her palms growing moist. It helped her remind herself that she was competing against a doll, though there was certainly something to be said for being the underdog. As a show of confidence, Elsbeth chose black. Farah would enjoy the nearly insignificant advantage of moving first. As the match began, each player opened conservatively and predictably with an eye on controlling the center. At first, the opponents mirrored each other's moves, as can happen when student and teacher compete head-to-head. As play entered the middle game, there would be a few minor exchanges, with each giving up a knight for a bishop and a bishop for a knight. But as the sun inched toward the horizon and the spectators crept closer to the players, Elsbeth began to develop a slight positional advantage. Farah had learned much from her mentor, but she was outmatched, though it wouldn't become apparent until the endgame when she made a move and immediately realized her blunder. She sighed and ran her hands across her bristly sprockets of hair. Because of her mistake, all Elsbeth would have to do would be to move king, rook, b2, and Farah would be forced to sacrifice her queen to remain out of check. After that, it would be just 2 more moves before Farah would find herself in checkmate. Farah could only stand and watch as Elsbeth placed her fingers upon the rook. For the first time in the match, Elsbeth looked up from the board at her opponent, something she only ever did when she knew the game was in hand. For to do so at any other time, she believed, showed doubt and weakness. Farah nodded as if to say, "Go ahead, get it over with." Elsbeth gazed out upon the audience members, who were impatiently leaning forward. Most of them had no understanding of the game, and thus no idea that Elsbeth was about to wrap it up. She picked Fergus out of the crowd, and the bird gave her not a sneer or a scowl, but instead a very surprising wink. When she looked at Jack and Jill, they offered her a reassuring smile. And when she found Dumpty, he gave her an affirmative nod and a thumbs up. Despite the fact that a victory here would forever doom them all to a life of misery, they were rooting for her. But why? And then it occurred to Elsbeth. They wanted victory for her because they knew how badly, how desperately she wanted to go home. Despite the devastating effect it would have on their own lives, they wanted what was best for her. Elsbeth shifted her attention back to the board. She paused for the longest minute since the dawn of time. She gnawed on her lower lip until the taste of blood told her to stop. Then, quite inexplicably, she removed her hand from the rook and instead took hold of her queen bishop and captured White's queen rook. Not only had she failed to take advantage of Farah's mistake, Elsbeth had completely turned the tide of the game, and not in her own favor. 3 quick moves later, Farah moved her spared queen c4, creating a situation in which either player would lose were it her turn. And it was Elsbeth's turn. In chess terms, it is known as a trebuchet, named for a medieval device used in siege warfare and similar to a catapult. "Yes," Elsbeth whispered. "Of course, that's it." Without hesitation, she made her move. Farah countered, and with not a trace of pride or triumph, flatly declared, "Checkmate." As Dumpty raised Farah's right hand, hats were tossed into the air, and the crowd erupted in wild cheering, singing, and applause. "That's it, then," said Elsbeth, offering her hand to her opponent. "Well played." "Well played indeed," said Farah. "You did that on purpose." "I don't know what you're talking about," said Elsbeth. "You're far too good a player to have made a mistake like that. You threw the game." Elsbeth made no further attempt to deny the accusation. She just looked at Farah and smiled. "I'm sorry I didn't congratulate you," she said. "I deserve no congratulations for that," said Farah. "I was referring to the wedding. I want you to know that I'm very happy for you both." "Oh, thank you," said Farah. This seemed to have caught her off guard, to the point that she stammered for a bit before saying, "Your blessing means a lot to me. You know, I'll be needing a maid of honor." Elsbeth felt her throat tighten. "And you would ask me?" "I know I've said some pretty horrible things to you," said Farah. "It's okay," said Elsbeth. "They were all true. They may have been at the time. Anyway, I would be honored if you'd stand with me. It won't be anything fancy. No gown, no ring, no cake. Only the things that matter. I would be happy to, said Elsbeth. Then she squinted and moved closer. Could it be? It certainly seemed that way. Your hair. It's getting longer. Unconvinced, Farah brought her fingers to the bristly sprockets and felt them for length. You're right. It is growing. My hair is growing back. Now I feel slightly less guilty for chopping it off, said Elsbeth, just as Winky showed up and wrapped his fiancée in a victory hug. Excellent game, said Winky, who knew not the first thing about chess. I'm quite proud of you. Don't be, said Farah, while staring directly at Elsbeth. I had nothing to do with it. You're just being modest, my dear, said Winky. The important thing is that we still have our commander-in-chief, which means we still have a chance of defeating Cruel. A trebuchet, said Elsbeth. A what? Said Winky. I've always been quite good at throwing things, said Elsbeth. It's one of my greatest talents, and I've always found it to be very effective. A trebuchet is like a catapult. Can we build one? Winky folded his arms and scrunched up his forehead. May I ask what you plan to do with it? Why, attack the castle, of course, said Elsbeth. You mean my castle? You want to throw rocks at my castle? Unless you'd rather wait until it falls apart on its own. All right, then, said Winky. A trebuchet you shall have. But building it is one thing. We'd still have to figure out a way to get it across Torcano Alley and up the cliffs. Yes, but let's worry about that when the time comes, said Elsbeth, whose list of things to worry about was getting longer by the day. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch an ogre by the toe. When he hollers, make him pay for his awful wicked ways.